So the last panel that we've had, and thank you so much, to the four of you for sharing so much about your practices, has shown us how important it is to have a really strong link to communities, to be able to go in and document them accurately, especially during the times of crisis. And I think what came through this panel as well is that the visual journalist in that case does not just act as a documentarian, someone who will represent the community, but also someone who actually brings back information to the community. And I remember when we worked with Jessica, in particular, at the time, about, okay, well, COVID hit, and, first of all, what is going on in your community? Are you safe? What do people know? What do people not know? What information do we need to bring back to them? Because Jessica was in a unique position to be able to, A, understand that, but also do that because people trust her as a journalist in that community. And so we actually did work with Jessica on an information campaign to bring resources in terms of what is COVID and how do you access showers, food, et cetera, at that particular moment. And so what visual journalists do, because they are at the forefront and they can't report from desks, is that they're actually building a link and a bridge to back to the community, and I think we don't talk about that enough. And so this next panel really is about the ability for visual journalists to act as trusted messengers. Another thing I just wanted to point out quickly is the fact that we believe and trust visual information really more than any other kind of information. And if you think about how e-commerce platforms and tech companies are really building on the power of visual to get you to click on advertising and buy certain products, it's really like they're measuring the power of imagery to a T, right? What's been fascinating, though, is that for those media outlets that are at the center of bringing information to the public, there has been, in the last few years, a massive investment, as we've talked about, in visual journalism. And so actually, local media outlets and media outlets in general are using visual journalism in general less than they used to. So when we look at the state of local media, we've not only lost more than 2,000 local papers in the US since 2004, but we've also lost more than 52% of visual storytelling staff in those newsrooms. And that is the paradox that we are working on at CatchLight. When we looked at, what are some of the issues that we are trying to solve for, we felt like it was really important to build back visual journalism in local newsrooms to be able to inform and engage audiences in ways that are really deep. And so in 2019, starting with Jessica and Felix and David Rodriguez, who is going to be in our next panel, as well as Sebastian Hidalgo, we made kind of this crazy bet that if we were to embed visual journalists and help subsidize the salary of visual journalists to go back in certain local newsrooms and increase the ability for those newsrooms to do more visual journalism, we would A, see a higher engagement of audiences with the content, and B, that likely is that these visual journalists will continue to work with those newsrooms. And the fact of the matter is that out of all the visual journalists that we placed in local newsrooms in the Bay Area, 3 of them are still working with these newsrooms, and the other one has gone back to Chicago and is now working with National Geographic. So the bet was in many ways right, and we're very excited now to be launching this initiative at a much bigger scale in the state of California with 5 newsrooms across California, and we have, new fellows coming in, and we're opening 5 full-time staff positions this year, and then that's going to go up hopefully to 8 to 10 next year. So that's what we've been up to in terms of our local efforts. And here to talk about the role of trusted messengers and the role of visual journalists in local news deserts, we have Andrea Bruce, who is actually a CatchLight Global Fellow and has been an international correspondent, a Nieman Fellow, a National Geographic photographer, and who in the last 2 years has actually taken on to create a local newsletter for her county, Pamlico County in North Carolina, and has been at the forefront of fighting misinformation in that county. And then we also have David Rodriguez, who was a CatchLight Local Fellow, and plays with the Salinas Californian and has now been a staff photographer for the Californian for the last 2.5 years. Is that right, David? And has been working also really hard to leverage the power of visual journalism to bring more information to that community and to increase engagement. They will be in conversation with Jeremy Hay, who is our new director of audience development and membership, and was the founder of Spaceship Media, and I will let them take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elodie, so much, and thank you, everybody, for being here. It's great to be here, whether you're in the room or on the live stream. So to start right in, we asked Andrea and David to prepare a presentation to start us off to introduce us to their community and to their work. But before jumping into that, I wanted just to set the stage a little bit with a definition of news deserts, which of course are a big part of the title to this panel, Investing in Trusted Messengers, an Antidote to News Deserts. And a lot of the research, the leading research into news deserts and their impacts is taking place at the University of North Carolina I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm back. A lot of the research is taking place at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is about 3 hours from where Andrea is based. And the definition that orients that research is a community, so the definition of a news desert that guides that research is a community that lacks access to the kind of credible and comprehensive news and information that feeds democracy at the grassroots level. And to that, I would add only that a news desert is also a community where people find it increasingly difficult to see themselves and their neighbors and strangers in their community represented fairly and accurately, if at all, in news images. So with that as a backdrop, I'd love to ask Andrea to start us off with introduce us to Pamlico County.
All right, thank you. I first want to start by thanking CatchLight for being such an inspiration, for always thinking forward, and to all of the amazing storytellers here that are such an inspiration. It's really an honor to meet and to call you a colleague, so thank you. So I'm going to introduce you to where I live, Pamlico County, North Carolina, and tell you a little bit about the odd road that I took to get there. I'm from a small town. I grew up in small towns. My first job was a small town newspaper in New Hampshire. And I never, hold on, glasses, I'm getting old. Sorry, hold on. I never thought I was going to, cover war or, oops. It's not something that I ever, planned on doing, but I almost, by mistake or chance, ended up covering that for 15 years. I covered war and conflict overseas as a photographer for the Washington Post and for the New York Times. I lived primarily in Iraq and Afghanistan and places where the US often exports ideas of democracy. For 15, that led me to wonder, what does democracy mean to people living in the US? So it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but this is a photo of people lining up to vote near Washington, D.C. And on the walls it's a police training facility. You see portraits of the police officers who are kind of watching the line as people vote. So I worked my way back to the United States, and with help from CatchLight and Photo Wings and National Geographic, I explored what people in the U.S. believed democracy looks like, or if they felt it at all, if they felt they had it at all. And it's a project that I called Our Democracy. And that eventually led me to here. These are not exactly photos from my bulletin or newsletter. These are photos kind of to introduce you to this area that I live in. Pamlico County, where I graduated from high school. And I also would love to maybe eventually have some conversations with all of you about the idea of community, because it's a complicated thing. And when you talk about inside or outside, because I'm from this county, I'm white, I know the people who live there. I know where they come from. I know what they've been through. But I'm also very different. My sympathies are different, and how you define your community can be in many different ways. So it's been an interesting and kind of hard responsibility to feel I want to go back and I want to, regain trust as a journalist and a member of the community, to try to better inform people so they can make good decisions. So this is, duck, deer, and bear hunting are all big in my county, and it's so remote that it would be easy to think of it as more like an island. It's not difficult to meet families who have never left the county. And most of my efforts are honed on simply sharing stories, the stories of the people in Pamlico County as humans, as people. For example, I spent the day with Berkeley Hill, who is the animal control officer. He helped Carol Williamson, shown here, find a home for her dogs. Her husband had just been in a horrible car accident, and she found that she couldn't care for the dogs while also caring for her husband. And the idea is that everyone has a story. In photos and words, this is a Facebook bulletin, an independently publishing platform that is emailed to people who subscribe. It's a free newsletter. And here, in the county, we basically, sorry, I'm missing a picture. Let me see if I can get it forward. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like when it's emailed to people. Facebook has no editorial control, as I said. This is a photo of, since it's right on the coast of North Carolina, this is a photo of the ferry that kind of brings people in and out of the area. In the county, we have 2 stoplights, $5 stores, and a shrinking population of about 10,000 people. We are often referred to as down in the county, which is the name of the column, because the county sits right at sea level, as low as you basically can get. It's a beautiful area, but like much of the United States, we wrestle with drug addiction, poverty, poor health care, education, and hurricanes. And here, you can see the sea level rise. This is the main street next to our harbor in Oriental, North Carolina during a nor'easter. It's pegged now as nuisance flooding. We're not the expensive, fancy coast, but we're the inland waterway where commercial fishermen and loggers, hunters, and farmers are born and remain. And we are a news desert and a food desert. The county is racially diverse, conservative, and religious. Mistrust of the media is huge. There's one weekly paper that is printed and given out for free. It's found on every countertop of every business, and it contains local mugshots and national political conspiracy theories. So this newsletter is really an experiment to see if I can get people to trust the media. By bringing them into the process, especially, I'm very open, I'm transparent with the people I cover. I actually let them read the stories before I publish them. And I spend a lot of time talking to the community at the local schools and meetings, different discussions. And this is Ariana Cox, a high school senior, right before prom last week. I just thought she looked really cool and thought you guys should see her too. But also, really this bulletin, it's to see if residents can really redefine their community as the people who live there, instead of the politics that so often divide it. That's really my goal, that common humanity. And if you would like to follow, you can look up Down in the County and Bulletin. You can find me and subscribe for free.
Thank you, Andrea. And I really recommend the subscription to Down in the County. It's a great read.
Hello? All right. So that was going to be a tough act to follow, but can we give another round of applause for Andrea and all the great fellows sitting up front? Sweet. I wrote a lot of things down, but I'm not going to remember none of that, so I'm going to try to speak from here. We'll see. We'll give it my best shot. So a lot of the work that I focused during my time with CatchLight focused on the farm working community in Monterey County, and it was specifically the farm working community during a pandemic. And if you're telling yourself, oh, the farm working community, and this only applies to the farm working community, no, this applies to the chef at your favorite Chinese place. This applies to a nanny that one of your friends might have. This applies to a maid. This affected a lot of Latinos, not only the farm working community. So some of the racial disparities that I focus on were really close to my heart. And I found it very hard not to be biased, because a lot of the issues that were happening to Resi Salvador and Aldo Salvador, which were some of the primary subjects in my story, were some of the issues that I went through as a child. So I started to think to myself, like, I didn't feel at first that I was I didn't have the right to tell this story. I didn't feel that I was doing this story justice. But as we went on, I continued to bond with the family, and we continued to create connections with the community. We continued to put this work out there when it focused on the housing plight of these families, living in a one-bedroom, which then that exacerbated the rise of COVID within the Latino community, because what's the word? It just skipped my mind. How can you quarantine if you're living with 7 other people in 2 rooms? So it became nearly impossible for this community to get away from the virus. And then we focused on the food insecurity, when all of America then started lining up in food banks. Not all of America, some people in America, which it was a regular thing for farm workers to line up in food banks. And then for a lot of farm workers, the lines became even longer, where some weren't even able to make it because then they had to go back. A lot of them would come during their lunch and try to line up to get food for their family. And then they would have to leave because then their lunch would end and the line was still long. And then we focused on the inequity in education. This became more apparent, and this I found a lot more close to my heart, just because trying to study, trying to do homework when there's 5 other kids running around, like I was terrible at school. Like my focus wasn't great, but I could barely imagine if I was during school, during Zoom. I don't think I'd be here. Okay. So then we focus on this opportunity that finally came along with CatchLight. They gave me the opportunity to amplify my voice within the community, to start focusing on the beautiful people that make a local community. And it started giving me the ability to not only feel sure of myself, but feel sure of the community I was covering, feel proud of not only focusing on the struggles, of not only focusing on the disparities, but focusing on the pride, on the determination, on the resilience of these people. So that's why a lot of the images you're not seeing my CatchLight project, you're seeing different events of different people that trusted me enough to take their photo. This was an intimate process between me and the person that I photographed. And if you ask me anything about each person, I can tell you their favorite color, I can tell you their favorite restaurant, I can tell you anything about this person. I don't know what I was going with that, but I was going somewhere. And, okay, this one I will read off. As someone who grew up in this community, my family and a lot of my friends' families live disconnected to our local media. That's what's kind of surreal that now I am the media. That disjunction now informs my work as a photojournalist. My ongoing mission is to continue to bridge connections and create trust within the community, and continue to find solutions to better help the people in the communities I cover, no matter where they are. So, thank you. I would just want to give a quick thank you to my editors, Cheyenne Romero, Eric Umer, and Chelsea Adami for letting me be here, because I should be working, because we're a very tiny newsroom. So thank you, and thank you, CatchLight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David. So you both gave just the perfect jumping off point to go right into the question of how, and you both had kind of different experiences. You were there in your community, David. You came back to your community, Andrea. How did you go about, and what did you do to gain trust from people who either didn't trust the media or who had lost trust in the media? Andrea.
Well, I think it starts first with what everyone has kind of talked about today, which is listening and talking to people, just having discussions, figuring out what are the issues that people are really facing. So things can get kind of clouded into like national politics or issues that really don't affect the people. But when you sit down and you really talk to them, then you find out that, like, these are the issues that are affecting everyone. It's drug addiction, it's poverty, it's things that are affecting probably most of the United States. It's not unique in that way, but how it's affecting the people in that community, they don't see it almost through their own lens. So just talking it through, being open to listening to people, even if you don't agree with them, being really patient, and also recognizing people's history in their own family. I don't know. I think that what Jessica said earlier is that you feel like you're not only I'm not only an outsider to people like in Iraq, but I'm an outsider to my own neighbor, and I have to treat everyone like their own. They are their own story, and to understand that is pretty important to gaining people's trust as well.
To reference Jessica again, it often starts with listening, as you were saying. Does that resonate with you?
It definitely resonates. I think even though I've only worked at the Californian for 2.5 years, I feel like I've been documenting that city for the 20 years that I've been there since I've moved from Mexico. Growing up, whether it was seeing my friends getting into trouble, whether it was, doing stuff that I can't say right now in front of you guys, but doing these things, growing up in this community and documenting this, and now getting to do that as a person, as a photographer, it gives me a lot of insight, because even myself, that I've been there for 20 years, I still find it hard to have people trust me, because it's not even that I'm a local, so they should trust me. It's the fact that people are hurt. There's a lot of people that are hurt right now, and photographers are, I know we're not only providing a great service, but we're healers in a sense through our photography, whether we're sitting there with them and, like Felix was saying, just listening to them. And we're actually caring and coming from a place where we want to do good in their lives and leave more than what we came out of. I think the community needs that. And even though it's hard for the community to trust me in the beginning, as soon as that process begins, people start trusting me. And then that person connects me to the auntie, and then that person connects me to the cousin, and then that person connects me to the next door neighbor. And that's how I start building community and trust. And I guess become a trusted messenger.
It's like you both anticipated the next question, which is, I was thinking about the title of this panel, which has that question in it, which is how do we harness the power of visual journalism to rebuild trust and fight misinformation, especially in communities where there's been a disinvestment in local news. And so my question is, what is it about visual journalism that makes it, in the right hands, such a potent tool?
I've been waiting for this question. I think people right now, I think the word is desensitized. That's the word, where everything that we see just becomes this thing where we're like, oh, more killing, more of this, and it just brings a burden to our hearts and just to our lifespan as a whole. So for photographers to find ways to make you see beauty, it's not an easy thing. So we're not only able to create beauty, but we're able to create curiosity. And we're able to get those questions boiling up in your head, and sometimes those questions lead to change of like, why, maybe I should run for mayor and try to help my community, so people don't have to live off of scraps. Maybe I should become head of the housing agency so people aren't living in so 8 people, 10 people aren't living in like a 2 to 3 bedroom home, Yeah, I think that's one of the superpowers that we have. We create curiosity, and I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. I think photographs can sometimes hold a mirror and sometimes make people feel a little bit more like, I exist. I'm not invisible. I'm here. This is my story. This is who I am. And they can acknowledge themselves sometimes too in a community, and but it also has like a universal language. I think, in my case, it's also kind of strange that I've had like kind of an international, a little bit of an international audience. So like there are people from Afghanistan following down in the county, which is super cool. And knowing that photos have this like lack of barrier, they go beyond language, and it goes directly to the human aspect, I think is really important.
Are there any ways that you can think of that the images that you have made have bridged gaps in your community where there are gaps in trust?
Oh, most definitely. I think it all began with the CatchLight project and focusing on these farm worker community. I kept getting messages like, we've never seen the farm working community be documented with so much pride and integrity. and with so much respect. And I felt that. I'm like, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to show that these people are incredible humans who are working their butts off to provide for their family, to create a future for their kids, to be able to take their kids out and go to the local flea market. Like, that's all that they want. They don't want anything else. And that, to me, it just started giving this confidence and started reassuring me that the photos were having an impact in the community. And it wasn't only translating towards the community, it was translated through their own farm workers. The farm workers saw themselves there and were like, wow, people actually care about the work that we do. I'm like, of course, you're feeding the nation. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. Is there, in Pamlico County, Andrea?
Embarrassingly, I have to ask you to repeat the question. I was getting involved into David's answer and visualizing it, and then I totally lost.
It was a good visualization. I was asking whether there's images that you can think of that you've made that have bridged a gap of trust in your community, where maybe have like touched a spark of trust in the community.
I think just covering. As a member of the media or as a journalist, being open to cover the local sheriff's department, to being open to cover loggers and commercial fishermen and people that think that journalists just automatically don't like them, that there's like this, like, and maybe there is some kind of snobbery somewhere where we close our minds to knowing some people. I don't know. It's I think just going and facing people that would automatically not trust the media, and saying, "Hey, I'm the media." They're like, "Oh, it's you." It's like, okay, let's talk, and then it kind of breaks down.
So, one of the things I'm thinking about is that you both live and work, really within the community that you're reporting on. And I was wondering whether that makes you more vulnerable in a way, and what that's like.
You want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what everyone said in the panel before this, especially Mabel, like it's just you have a huge accountability. And I don't think anyone knows, or I did not know, how hard it is to be a journalist in your own community. And there have been a lot of discussion about like contests and stuff like that. And I do feel like maybe in some ways the big publications, they really get it wrong because they're so focused on winning these big awards. It's like they're so excited to wear these fancy clothes, but they're losing the race. Like they're not paying attention to like what really matters or like the stories that need to be told sometimes. And I think that the people who should be getting those awards are probably all the local journalists, all those papers, the small town newspapers that are still existing. And when you're neighbors with the people who will be your daughter's teacher next year, or when people know your family and it reflects on your entire family, and when they know where you live and they know that you may politically not align with them, all of those things can be scary, and it can be hard. So yeah, it can be tough.
How do you cope with it?
Just transparency. I let everyone know exactly what I'm doing. I tell people my intention is really important. I'm here to bring pride to the county. I'm here to put everyone, to bring everyone together beyond politics. And that's what I tell people, and that's exactly what I try to do.
David?
I think it makes you feel like, and it makes you get it right. It makes you, before you publish this, you make sure you get things right. because first of all, it's a small community. If something gets out there and you get a fact wrong, usually that doesn't affect a lot of people, but like being so connected to the community, caring so much about it, like I get hurt if they get hurt. And the last thing I want is hurt someone that trusted me. So it definitely helps me lead with a lot of love and care and empathy towards whatever story it is. And introducing and like heading into each story that way, even if it's a story about a community leader doing some terrible stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna write the truth, and that's it. And I'm gonna publish it, and I'm gonna publish it to the best of my ability. And I think that's been the best way that I've found to not only stay visible in my community. I think that's how I've gotten a lot of respect of my community, because they see that every story is going to be written fairly.
It's not a lesson that I don't think is taught in most journalism schools or classes, but leading with your heart was what you made me think of. One of the things you talked about, Andrea, was how you're really transparent. And I think you had said before that you sometimes share your work with the people who are the subjects of it. And, that's in a lot of ways like a verboten in journalism still. But, and I was wondering whether there are other kind of, rules of the road, journalism rules of the road, that should be re-examined in order to rebuild the kind of trust that we've lost.
I mean, yes. I think that, there's so many important things going on in the world that we need as many journalists as possible from every walks of life, big cities, small towns, we just need more. But when, as someone who's worked for big publications, when they go into smaller communities, I feel like there are some simple things that we could do if they would just add one more day, or maybe a couple more days to the coverage. Like if the first day was about maybe going to the local school or going to a couple of meetings and talking to people about the story that they're about to do, if they were transparent. I know I know one reporter from the Washington Post. She calls everyone she's ever done a story on the day after the story runs and says, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I get wrong? What did I get right? Tell me. And that's a bold thing to do. But all those things are the things that local journalists are doing. They have to, because they live there. And I think if a couple of those types of things were added to a bigger publication's week in one location, or a couple of days, at least they would be involving the community into their process more. And it works on both sides. It makes them a better reporter or a photographer. And on the other side, it allows the media to be not this, it allows to demystify what journalism is. We're just people, We're not perfect by far. And we want to get it right? So why don't we involve people, like everyone else has said today?
Less parachuting, more taking time. Also, you were looking for water before, Andrea. It's right behind your chair.
Oh, God, thank you.
Jeremy, what was the question? I got lost in her answer.
Rules of the road of journalism that, it's time for them to be re-examined as we try and go about rebuilding trust.
Rules of the road, definitely don't make stuff up. I think that's the number one. And yeah, I think the biggest one, and I think you can see a common thread of all the fellows and our answers. And I think CatchLight did a good job picking these people, because we all have a similar idea of what communities need. I think the biggest aspect that journalists should understand is the care that you have and understanding the connections that you make with people. You don't have to take the photo, leave, and then check, and then not talk to them again. No, you can get their photo, document their story, and then text them on their birthday, like, hey, happy birthday. That's something I try to keep in mind. Like, I'm not gonna take a photo of that text message that I made. That's when one of my editors told me, and this guy kind of just runs 5 papers throughout Gannett, and he said, do what feels right to you, what's ethical to you. And I mean, as long as I'm not making up photos, as long as I'm not making up facts, I want to care as much as I can for these people. I want to connect as much as I can with these individuals, and I want to push my images, and I want that to demonstrate in my images. Yeah, there was something else, but I don't.
Well, I would love to know if you guys have any questions for each other.
I have a lot for her, but I'll save them for later.
Well, yeah, I'm curious, like, what is the hardest part of your job? And, yeah, what is the hardest part going forward also?
I think the hardest part going forward is just being a small newsroom and not having the financial backing to do these kind of stories. If it wasn't for CatchLight, we wouldn't have done this in-depth project where we spend 5 to 7 months working on this. And that's what a lot of local newsrooms need. And that's my biggest fear, that one day I might leave the Californian to pursue other opportunities, to then be able to learn and be able to come back in the future. But then that time when I'm gone, like, who's gonna take over? And who's gonna be there caring for these stories? And of course, the Californian would love to hire another David Rodriguez or another Mabel or Jessica, Josue or Felix or Andrea, like, of course. But the money's not there. And that's why these organizations are so important, like CatchLight, because they're investing on the ground on these journalists, on these local newsrooms that are creating change within these communities, changes that we might not see because we're not in the community, but change that the community members are seeing, instant change. And that's what's been so rewarding yet challenging about, my time at the Californian, just as a journalist. I have a question for you.
What?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. You're doing so much abroad. You're doing so much work abroad. You're doing so much work during this conference. How do you make time for just some self-care and balancing this work, this international work with this community work?
I have no balance. I don't know how that's. I don't know that. I don't know. Sorry, I don't have a really good answer for that. I wouldn't really recommend anyone to. I guess I just do the stories that I find are important, and a lot of the international work or the other work that I do is what helps me pay the bills, and I love it too. I think I learn a lot from every community I go into, and I think the important thing is to know that I'm an outsider, or be really humble in what you know. Embrace your ignorance. And I think, aside from that, I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I spend every other minute I can with her. So.
Beautiful. I got another question. What advice do you have for young journalists trying to build community in a community that might not be their own? Is that a quick answer?
For a young journalists, I see the wrap-up sign, but I will quickly. I think that young journalists and photographers should become an expert in something other than photography, and then use that knowledge to inform the work that you want to do in the places you want to do it.
Thank you, Andrea and David. My eyes are bad, so I can't see the sign that Lucy's holding up. So look it up. Just stop. Okay. So I guess it's time for Q&A.
Ooh, questions.
This question's for Andrea. Forgive me if this question's a little cliche, perhaps, but I think it's an important one to touch on. Environments like this that are journalistic, artistic, creative people who probably consider themselves progressive-leaning. And I think about this as someone who went to school and has lived in the South. What do you think is one of the most common misconceptions, or what is one of the most important things for people in California, in New York, in large cities on the Northeast and the West Coast to know about North Carolina, or even the North and South Carolina?
That's a really hard question. They're not, okay, so no matter where you are in the world, and I see this happening a lot in like humanitarian aid organizations too, like the people who live there usually know a lot about what they need. And to go from a big city into a smaller place or another place, and to think that you know better than they know what they should know, and like how to live their lives, sometimes, I mean, most of the time is not a smart way to approach it. Maybe there are lots of different things that could factor into understanding a place and listening and using knowledge together to move forward. So I think thinking that people from a small town in the South are just dumb is not the way to go. And I think it creates bigger divisions, even though education is an issue, and even though there's a ton of misinformation. It's not that they're dumb. It's a lack of local news. It's a lack of trusted news sources. I mean, the reason why I'm with Facebook, with this bulletin, is because I went to all of these rallies, Trump rallies, and I asked everyone, where do you get your news? And they said, Facebook. So where do I go? I go to Facebook. I'm like, this is like one of the sources where people are, getting their information. Anyway, it's, I also think, it's just a hard question. I wish you could answer it, actually. Go ahead. My experience, I mean, there are stereotypes in every place that are true sometimes, but I think there are also, people who are conservative in one vein are not conservative in another. And I think that actually there's more similarities that hold people together than there are differences, and I think the differences are sometimes made up by big political machines. And I think I often have, I now see my big city progressive friends very differently when they comment on a lot of my stories in patronizing ways to the people who are in the stories. And I have to call them up and say, hey, you know what you just did? And that's not cool, like people are really trying hard here, and maybe that, I don't know if that really answers your question, but I tried.
I guess I just was curious, any lessons you've learned from this approach for the more antagonistic watchdog type journalism that's also important, that addresses maybe some of the structural issues that impact some of the communities you work with. And I think those kind of communities can exist in different places, and like here we're talking about giving voice to these more marginalized voices, but there's also part of that too that is sticking it to the powers that be. And so I'm just curious kind of if there's, any ways that this experience you think could be useful for those practicing that, and also if there's things that you've learned about ways to do that perhaps better that can have more impact. You know, journalism holding power to account in the more traditional sense.
I think I have an answer for that. I think just letting people know, just if you get a camera, a lot of people in power will be scared of you if you show up. And just, oh God, I was going somewhere with that, but I lost my train of thought. I'll regain it. I'll pass it to her.
I'm trying to figure out if I know exactly what you're asking. Like, is there a place for watchdog journalism in like my position? Like, or where, is that what you're trying to ask, or? David?
I think I got it now. Yeah, no, there's definitely, and especially in local media, what I've seen that those two things of uplifting and holding the powerful accountable kind of come together, because every image not only makes the powerful nervous, but then it starts informing the public and it starts getting them being part of the solution. You start getting young activists looking at these images and start taking action, whether it be something that a city supervisor said in one of the town halls, and then you have this person already right after that setting something up and giving me a text message, David, are you on this? And I wasn't, but I am now. And you start getting this you get all these uplifting photos and you start getting all these images that are helping the community, but also that's also influencing the community. They're saying, oh, David, you become the go-to person for that. And you start getting more trust and you start getting more sources through that process of just being there, being active, and no matter what the situation is, just being present.
We're done. I saw the sign. Thank you all.